I'm Ash Pemberton, and this is CNX Podcast, the Chiang Mai community podcast where local businesses, brands, and interesting people get heard.
Birding is huge. It's millions of people. It's a huge thing around the world. Some people just look at birds. Other people feed birds. Other people photograph birds. Some people travel and look at birds. One of the saddest things in life is an animal becoming extinct, a dodo, Tasmanian tiger or whatever, just not being able to see that anymore. Beautiful white cranes dancing in the snow and the biggest owl in the world coming down and eating fish out of a little frozen stream at night. It's like finding a little rough diamond. Just that little exposure to wildlife can be life-changing for people. On my phone, I'll pull up the sound of that bird and I'll play it through my Bluetooth speaker, and that will bring this bird in close so everybody can see it. We can go to Antarctica. We can go to Papua New Guinea to look at birds of paradise displaying. It's the kind of stuff that you've seen growing up on David Attenborough documentaries. You can see that stuff yourself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show today, Mr. Charley Hesse.
Thanks, Ash. Good to be here.
So, Charley, thank you very much for coming in. You are a husband, you're a father, and I know of you primarily as a birder. Now, that statement, the first time I heard it, I actually wasn't aware that was the phrase for like a devoted bird watcher. I know now that you are the host of the Naturally Adventurous podcast. That's right. Good. I know that you're a tour leader with tropical birding.
Correct.
And that you do a lot of overseas birding expeditions with clients.
That's right.
And that you are a tutor at the online school of birding. So please just give us a little bit of insight. What's the big deal with birding?
Birding is huge around the world. It's absolutely huge. I didn't come prepared with any numbers, but it's millions and millions of people. You look at the UK population, 60 million people? Probably 1 million of those members of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. So you're talking, 1 in 60 people in the UK is some kind of bird watcher, at least, and many more in the States. It's a huge thing around the world. It's a very varied thing. It takes on different aspects. Some people just look at birds. Other people feed birds. Other people photograph birds. Some people travel and look at birds. So there's a whole lot of different ways to do it. Some people twitch. You might have heard of twitchers.
Well, I have. Difference between a twitcher and a bird watcher.
So I wouldn't really consider myself a twitcher, but I am a birder. A twitcher is somebody that goes to look for a specific bird. Say some really rare bird turns up in your area or wherever, and then you rush off to go and look for that particular bird. Maybe it's a vagrant, which is a bird that's not normally there and has come from somewhere else. In the UK, sometimes you get a bird from the US that just gets lost and flies over. And all the British birds, they just go nuts, and thousands of them turn up to try and find this extremely rare bird, and that is called twitching.
Right, that's a twitcher.
That's a twitcher. I have been known to twitch, but I wouldn't consider myself a compulsive twitcher. Some of the things you mentioned in your introduction for me are things that I started during COVID. I've been a tour leader for probably 15 years or more, but I started a podcast. I wrote a book. I did a lot of things during COVID, some of the things you mentioned there.
I'd love to talk to you about the tours, but before that, obviously, you just mentioned my buzzword, which is podcasting. Tell me about your podcast.
Naturally Adventurous is a podcast about not specifically birds, but we do often talk about traveling in search of birds. But it's kind of sort of nature travel podcast. So we get people on that travel often overseas. We talk about a lot of different places. I don't know how many countries we've covered on the podcast. It's probably well over 50. We talk about people going in search of mountain gorillas or people that go in search of different mammals around the world or different birds. We've talked about food, top bird watching locations for food. We've talked about different cultural things. We've talked about travel safety. So we talk about anything related to specifically nature travel. And also we talk about a lot of travel stories, about adventure stories, things that happen when people travel.
Who is we when you mention we?
My co-host on the podcast is a guy called Ken Behrens. He's another tour leader.
I thought you were going to say twitcher.
He probably has been known to twitch, but yeah, he wouldn't consider himself a twitcher. He's a pretty well-known guy in the birding scene. He's author of several books. One he co-authored with me, The Habitats of the World. He's written bird books on Ethiopia, on South Africa, on Madagascar, Wildlife Guide to Madagascar. So he's a very well-traveled guy with a lot of travel stories, yeah.
Cool. When you go on tours, do you go together?
We have co-guided. So if I'm leading a tour, I will usually be on my own with a smaller group. So say we have 3, 4, 5 people, I'll be taking those people around on my own. But if it's a bigger group, 10, 12 people sometimes, we'll have a second tour leader to help. So yeah, we've co-guided a lot in a lot of different countries, yeah.
Yeah. Give me just like an example. Give me some flavor. Like, where have you been on tour?
Because I lived in South Africa for a long time. My wife is South African. I lived in South Africa for 9 years. So I do a lot of tours to South Africa.
Just for the listeners in the Chiang Mai community, your wife is Ronelle and your son is Felix.
That's correct.
Yeah. And you're a Panyadin parent.
I am.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. I've done a lot of tours in Southern Africa. I lived in Japan for many years. So I've been leading tours to Japan for many years now. I go to Taiwan. I do other places in Africa. I do Namibia, Madagascar a lot. I do 10 to 12 tours a year. Cool. And that can be in 10 to 12 different countries in a year. So I travel a lot. I travel to countries where I have a lot of experience of also the language, of the nature. Yeah.
And the places that you just listed there all felt very exotic. Is that because you're going to see more interesting wildlife there?
Wherever you go, different things. If I take people to Japan, I'll be showing them these beautiful white cranes dancing in the snow and the biggest owl in the world coming down and eating fish out of a little frozen stream at night. If I go to South Africa, I'll be showing them dancing blue cranes and big hornbills and secretary birds and things, and a lot of wildlife on safari as well. If I go to Madagascar, I'll be showing them lemurs. So yeah, everywhere you go is another fascinating thing to look at.
That's amazing. I imagine from what you've said, you've been to some pretty incredible places. Which is, from your career point of view, what's been your highlight? What's been the most magical birding moment?
That's quite a question. A place that's got a very special part of my life is Japan. I lived in Japan for 5 years and it feels very much like a second home for me. I love the culture as well as the wildlife. So going back there every year is a real pleasure. Love the food there as well. I love explaining the culture to people. But I just love going to new places and it's a job that always gets me to new places. I led a tour to Fiji for the first time just a couple of months ago. And I got to see some of these things that I've been hoping to see for years and years. It's a great job to get you around, to get you traveling. That's one of my great passions in life is traveling.
Let's just use those UK stats that you said earlier, that there's 1 million bird fanatics, bird watchers, bird enthusiasts. How many people actually do your job?
There's different levels of what I do. I would call myself an international tour leader. I take people all around the world. So people that actually do what I do, you're talking about maybe a few hundred in the world.
Globally, yeah, right.
Globally. And there's people that do it on a more localized scale. There's bird guides in different countries. And then you're talking more thousands and thousands, yeah.
What skills do you need to be a great tour leader?
A lot of young people that want to get into the job, they think it's just going to be a way for them to travel for free.
Yeah.
And again, it's all going to be paid for. Fantastic. But those kind of people don't usually last very long.
You've seen them come and go.
I've seen them come and go. Yeah. You need a lot of people skills. You need patience.
Right.
I think is number one. You need organization. You can't just be turning up late. You've got to know exactly what you're doing. Good level of birding. You can be good at bird watching the same as you can be good at anything else. The same as anything else. The more you do, the better you get. We tend to be pretty highly skilled bird watchers, but yeah, there's a lot more to it. Even driving skill. We go places and we actually drive as well. So
you mean like off-road driving?
It can be off-road driving. Yeah.
You said patience. I mean, that's the one that I think of because that's how I think of bird watching. A bit like fishing for me. It's just not my thing, not my sport. Yeah. You need tremendous amount of patience. But were you talking about patience with your guests, with your clients, or waiting for the elusive bird to appear?
Both, in a way. I think more on the client management side of things. You do need patience to wait for birds, but you tend to know how long you're going to need. I know this bird. I know it might not turn up for 30 minutes, and I'll just sit there until I think we've had a good chance to see it. But yeah, mainly it's with people. You can get a lot of difficult people on tours. There's always a lot of challenges. So just being patient with people. You can point things out and people just forget the bird's name straight away. You know, they will say, what's this bird called again? And after the 50th time they've asked you that, you know, you just got to, you just say the name again.
So that's the skills. What about the tools or equipment? What do you need to actually purchase to do your first tour?
You need probably $10,000 worth of gear. You need a top-end binoculars, which can go for $2,000 to $3,000.
Yep.
You need a high-end scope, which can be $4,000. Photography is an ever-increasingly important part of the job. So you need a decent camera to take pictures of the tour of the birds and things like that. And that can cost you anything from $3,000 to as much as you want to pay. You can spend $20,000 on a camera easily. You need laser pointers. You need Bluetooth speakers.
What do you do with your laser pointer?
So if you can imagine, I'm with a group in a forest somewhere. I've heard some rare bird that we're looking for, and I've heard it make a sound. So on my phone, I'll pull up the sound of that bird and I'll play it through my Bluetooth speaker, and that will bring this bird in close so everybody can see it.
Now we're talking, because I wondered if you were going to set traps or construct the perfect scene, hoping that the bird will come down and then you've got the ultimate photo. But you're actually saying you would play sounds to bring them in.
Yeah.
They can't tell a Bluetooth speaker from a real...
No, that's the thing. But it's quite an art form in itself. This is called playback in the birding world. And the use of playback is it's a controversial thing because it can disturb the birds a little bit. If they're breeding and you're playing this tape, they're going to think you're another male in their territory or another female that they want to display to or whatever. So you're giving signals to birds. So it's something that has to be used in moderation. But that's what you do. Sometimes there'll be a little shy bird and it will just appear in the undergrowth, and you take your Bluetooth speaker and you put it down there in a little gap, and you'll stand back and wait for this little bird to cross a gap or whatever. There's all sorts of skills to it. But yeah, that's one of the things. Sometimes they're hopping around in the trees and you need a laser pointer to point to people. You say, look, it's up in the tree, and people, which tree, which branch? So you're getting a little laser pointer and pointing out the birds where they are. A lot of different parts to it. Just for the listeners, Ash got a big grin on his face.
I'm always smiling, but I was picturing you with your laser pointer in the underground, highlighting to me as your client what I was to look for.
Yep.
That's cool. So let's bring this whole birding scene back round to Chiang Mai. Mm-hmm. What's the bird scene like here?
I would probably put Chiang Mai as the best province for birding in Thailand.
Wow. Okay. Why's that?
It's probably got the highest number of species. It's probably got the highest diversity of habitats, even though it has no coast. It's got a whole range of different mountains. It's got different birds coming down. So if you've got the mountains like Doi Suthep and Doi Intanon and all these kind of places, these are some of the final extensions of the Himalayas. So you're seeing a lot of these birds that you might see in the Himalayas of India. So you've got those things coming down. You've got birds wintering in Chiang Mai, all different types. You've got a lot of rice fields. You've got them areas of scrub. So it's a very diverse area. You've got the highest mountain in Thailand with birds on the very top that you only get there. There's one bird that you only get on the top of that one mountain. So it's a really fascinating place to be.
That's cool. And if people have heard this and thought, I'd like to give that a go, what's your advice to someone if they just want to get started? Maybe their children are interested or they're interested themselves. How do we get started spotting birds?
There's a couple of groups, Facebook groups that you can join based in Chiang Mai. One is called the Lana Bird Club.
Okay.
And it has a lot of members. I think it's probably got about 2,000 members on the Facebook group. They organize, I would say, I think it's maybe monthly meetings. So they'll meet up in some place and go birding together, and then they can give you a good start. There's a fairly new kind of expat group called Chiang Mai Birders.
Okay, good name.
Good name, yeah. It's started by a friend of mine who's also called Charley.
Okay.
We're the two Chiang Mai Charlies.
Okay.
Yeah, he's recently started. He's been going maybe close on a year now, and he does a monthly bird walk, which you can come along to and join. The thing you need for bird watching is a pair of binoculars. I'm happy to recommend a pair. There's some brands, Bushnell or Nikon or whatever, that you can get fairly inexpensively. You spend 3,000-4,000 baht on one, and this is something that you just invest in once, and then you can go out and enjoy yourself. So that's one of the big mistakes that people make, is just get something very cheap that you can't really see.
Every time I do a phone call to someone overseas, they're just amazed by the background noise of all the birds that are just around my garden. And they're like, wow, you live in the most incredible place, because they can hear us. What sort of birds will we hear every day in Chiang Mai?
During COVID, I took groups of kids out birding, and everybody's, where are we going to go? Are we going to go to the mountains? Are we going to go here? And I said, no, let's go around Muban. Let's go around a little housing estate. And you can see a lot of birds in these places. You see a lot of bulbuls are a very common one. There's one called the red-whiskered bull. You might know it. It's got a little black crest and a little white cheek and a little red dot. And they've got a nice little tweety song that they call, you get these little tailor birds, these little kind of warbler type birds. They go, choo. They're always appearing on my podcast. The tailor birds, you'll get miners calling, you'll get oriental magpie robins singing from the roofs. There's probably 20 or so very common birds that are found like throughout the city.
What's the misconceptions with birding? Why would people like me think, oh, that's not very interesting? It almost has that reputation of train spotting. What's the misconception that everyone thinks of?
It has a bit of a stigma, especially in Britain, I would say. It has quite a stigma for being a kind of geeky sport. Anoraks, lots of geeky guys writing down train numbers and stuff like that. It's considered on the same level as that.
And this is my question. Is that a misconception or is that how it is?
It's how part of it is. Maybe the twitching scene is a little bit more like that.
Yeah.
But like I said, you can do birding in a lot of different ways. A lot of people are getting into bird photography now. And that is maybe considered a little cooler. They're creating beautiful images, uploading them to social media, sharing the beauty with lots of different types of people, taking videos and making little short films and stuff. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. One interesting thing is that birding used to be mainly done by certain nationalities, a lot more than others. It was predominantly a sort of Anglo, British, Australian, US thing, plus some kind of Scandinavians, Swedish, Norwegians, Dutch are big birders like that. There was this kind of Northern European thing to it. But I think the popularity of birding photography has broadened the appeal for a lot of people. A lot of Asian cultures seem to get a lot more into the photography side of it. You see a lot of Japanese, Chinese, Singaporeans, and a lot of Thais. The birding photography is very popular amongst Thais. And most people you'll see going out enjoying birds will be trying to take pictures of them. So there's different ways to do it.
When did you get into it?
I was young. By the time I was 8 years old, I was pretty keen. Yeah, so maybe even before that, 6, 7 years old.
Where'd that come from? From your parents? Or?
I've always had this intense curiosity for wildlife. I've always been nuts about animals. Certainly in the UK, if you go out into nature and you look for animals, you tend to see birds. It's difficult to go out and see badgers or foxes or deer or anything like that. You might see 20 species of birds. You might see a squirrel. I would always go out wanting to experience nature, and I would just see birds more and more. And I wouldn't say I was any more interested in birds than mammals at the time, but it's just that they were always there. They're just everywhere. So that was what got me into it, was love of nature, love of being outside. And I was in a sort of country area. And my father, he wasn't so much a bird watcher. He had a pair of binoculars, which I borrowed, and a bird book. And then that was me. And that's what got me started.
And did you start by going on someone else's tour, or did you just launch straight into doing your own tours?
It was something I did on my own for many years. So it was very much a sort of solo activity for me.
I hope you don't mind me asking this, but I'm just intrigued. On either your solo tours or tours that you've run internationally with clients, can you tell me, like, what's your biggest failure?
My biggest failure?
When you've been on a tour and you've had either expectations or set something up, what's been the thing that's gone wrong? And what springs to mind when I ask that?
We have birding jargon, like twitch. I told you that's looking for a specific kind of bird. There's another piece of birding jargon, which is dip, D-I-P.
Okay.
And dipping on something is going to look for something and failing to find it. And it's a big part of bird watching. If you saw what you were looking for every single time, it wouldn't quite be so much fun. The feeling that you don't know whether you're going to see it or not is quite exciting. You go out on a twitch and we're going to see this. Oh, I really want to see it. Oh, I missed it. Oh, everybody says you should have been here 5 minutes ago. You know, we were all looking at it and it flew away. So birding is just full of this hit and miss, failing to see things. And some people get upset. If you go on a big twitch, you drive for 10 hours to look for something and it's not there. It's disappointing. But I've come to sort of get used to that. If I give something my best shot, I don't feel too bad. And this is something I try and set expectations when I'm leading a tour, that this is birding. We all know what it's like. You don't always see what you're looking for. And I try and tell people, maybe we've got a 50% chance of seeing this bird. So I try and set expectations on a tour, but I also realize that myself when I'm going somewhere that I might not see it. But that really is part of what makes bird watching quite exciting.
So there's been no like massive disasters or any terrible incidents that you could share with us?
The one thing which kind of wakes me up at night sometimes in a cold sweat, I went to see a bird and I failed to see it, which has happened many times, but that bird may well be extinct now.
Really?
Yeah. I might never see that bird because I missed it.
You see, the way that you say that, it's like, what does that mean to you? That was that opportunity?
There was only one opportunity to see it for me. I went there, I missed it, and that was the time that I had to look for it. And then subsequently, very few years after that, the bird became extinct. This was a bird called the Cebu flower pecker in the Philippines. And it's a very frustrating thing to miss something. And I think I had one person on each side of me, and they were both looking at this bird. And they were like looking there, and I'm looking, and I just couldn't see it. And then it flew away, and then that was it. That was my only chance ever to see this thing. And for me, one of the saddest things in life is extinction, is an animal becoming extinct, a dodo or a Tasmanian tiger or whatever, just not being able to see that anymore. That is one thing that was very disappointing for me.
As a tour leader, what's the best compliment that you've ever received?
People can compliment your birding skill, but that doesn't really compliment you as a tour leader. Thank you for your patience. You've really made this an enjoyable tour. I think that in the end is job satisfaction. Part of your job is looking for things. If you don't find them, it doesn't really matter. As long as they've had fun, they've enjoyed it. And often it's not about seeing absolutely everything. It's about them going away from a place and having enjoyed it.
How are you a good birder? What makes the difference?
That's another interesting question. There's different criteria, I'd say. One is a knowledge of birds. It can be a knowledge of how to identify birds. Some people can identify something that's very similar to another bird. One thing is just having the skill of locating something. If there's an incredibly difficult to see bird, I know how and when to see it. I'll know what time of day to go. I'll know what call to use. Maybe it's got a little chipping call, and maybe it's got a little song. And you've got to know all these very, very intricate subtleties to be able to find things sometimes. So yeah, being able to find birds is good. Having a good eye for habitat. I know this bird likes this particular kind of grass, or this bird likes this type of flower that it feeds on, or whatever. Having a knowledge of habitats and behaviors and things like that, I think, is what makes a good birder.
Presumably you have to research that before you go out. You couldn't possibly know that about all the birds, could you?
No, it takes a lot of preparation. So when I go to a place for the first time, I'm doing a huge amount of background research before I go. So by the time I get there, I know everything about this place. I know how many times a bird has been seen, and I know what time of day. I know who's seen it. I know the exact location. I've got all the GPS points marked. I've got all the different types of vocalizations downloaded. You know, you do your homework, and then that's part of what makes a good guide.
You've actually got me quite excited now. I think I'd like to go birding with you.
Come anytime.
Yeah, so obviously if you wanted to do that, best way to start would be to go on one of the Facebook groups that you mentioned earlier and go on just like a local walk or hike.
Yeah.
That's going to cost you not much at all, I presume.
No.
I mean, a few $100 to support the tour guide.
That's it, yeah. So that's one thing. There's some apps you can download. There's one called Merlin Bird ID. You can download that for free. And it has packs. It has a Southeast Asia pack that you can download. And then that will have all the birds in a particular place. It will have all the bird calls from a particular place. You can go and buy yourself a bird book. Go down to their bookshop. They've got several good bird books for Thailand. So buy yourself a bird book. I can give some advice on some binoculars to get. So, you know, if you've got a bird book and a pair of binoculars, you're good to go.
You're off.
Yeah.
So that's how we could get started. Give me the other end of the scale. Like, what's the most extravagant package, or what's like the top end birders retreat or tour that you could lead someone on?
That's an interesting thing. If people have money to put into it, just give it a try and see if you like it. But if you do really like it and you do have resources, it's get yourself a good pair of binoculars. That's number one. You're going to enjoy it so much more if you're looking at this beautiful, clear image, which is great. Play around with photography. Try a camera. You probably love taking pictures of birds. And if you enjoy this and you want to travel and see the world, there's no limit to where you can go, where people like me can take you. We can go to Antarctica. We can go to Papua New Guinea to look at birds of paradise displaying. The kind of stuff that you've seen growing up on David Attenborough documentaries. You can see that stuff yourself. It's the most exciting thing in the world. Give it a go and see if it's for you.
Because you've mentioned binoculars a couple of times, maybe you could just throw a couple of brands in just so that people know, or they would know what to search for if they were looking for binoculars. So what would be like the good entry-level binoculars that would set you off?
There's a brand called Bushnell. You can buy them on Lazada. You look for the price range of about maybe 1,000 to 1,500 baht. If you don't have too much money to spend, that's something where you're going to see a clear image, which is great. The next level up is something called the Nikon Pro Staff, which is a very nice binocular. And those you're talking maybe 4,000 to 5,000 baht. That is probably the one that I would recommend if people can afford it. It's the Nikon Pro Staff. And they're also for sale on Lazada.
So what have you got?
I have Swarovskis. The sort of top 3 brands for birders. One is Swarovski, one is Zeiss, and one is Leica. And as I mentioned before, the sort of top end bracket is $2,000 to $3,000, and they're beautiful. But with binoculars, you tend to be paying a lot more for just a small increase in quality. If you, from $100 binoculars, you can go up to $500 binoculars, and they're not that much worse than $2,000 binoculars.
And then just my final question on watching and spotting is, do you feel that if you're looking it through a lens, so if you're looking through a camera, it's different to looking at the bird in its natural eyesight? Would you prefer to see it live in reality through your naked eye, or is it just fine to look at it through a lens?
There's different lenses as well. I use a scope and binoculars, and I have a camera, and then looking through those different things, you're seeing different things as well. Yeah. So I don't think you see it quite as nicely if you're only looking through a camera. You're getting a clearer image, and you can see it better by looking through binoculars rather than a camera. Some for bird photographers that only have a camera, they don't use binoculars. So I think it's always good to look through binoculars. And for things that are further away, if you're looking through a scope, you get a beautiful clear image. So I often put something in the scope here. Everybody's looking in their binoculars, and I say, have a look in the scope. And they say, no, I can see it fine looking through my binoculars. I don't, just have a look in the scope. And then look and they go, oh, wow, that's amazing. You just see more detail. You see more color. If you're only looking with a naked eye, you're not seeing all those details.
Right. So it's actually better to look at it through the scope.
Oh, yeah. And then other nice thing about a scope is it takes practice to be able to find things through binoculars. It's not something you can just put up to your hand and just see them straight away. It takes practice. But if you put something in a scope, it's a lot easier to look at. The image is just there. So when I'm taking beginner birders out, I tend to show them as much as I can through the scope, and then that will get them hooked.
Do you document all the birds you've seen? And in which case, is it like a numbers game?
Another great question. Yeah, I do photograph as many birds as I can when I'm on tours, and it can be a numbers game. Yeah. The one thing we haven't really discussed is the listing aspect. Listing, there's a competitive birding.
Are you competitive?
I'm very competitive.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Come on then, tell us about this.
There are just under 11,000 species of birds in the world. There's an American guy at the moment who's on the verge of seeing 10,000 species. Wow. He's going to be the first human ever to have seen 10,000 species.
What's his name?
He's called Peter Kestner. He's been a guest on my podcast twice, actually 3 times.
Okay. He's number one, it's certainly in terms of numbers.
In numbers, yeah. I have seen about 7,400 species, and that ranks me in the top 100 listers. And certainly within Thailand, I know one guy who actually also lives in Chiang Mai. He's seen well over 8,000 species.
Okay. You're number 2 in Chiang Mai.
I'm probably number 2 in Chiang Mai, yeah. So that's overall number of species. I use a system called eBird. You can use it for finding birds. If I'm looking for a particular bird, I can search on this program called eBird, this website, and it will show me where people have seen it recently. And then I can go and find it. Yeah. So it's a really cool thing. I would say there may be 100,000 people using eBird. It's a big thing. It's a popular thing. You can also put your photographs on eBird. So I put all my photographs on eBird, and I've actually photographed 4,300 species. And there's also a ranking for number of species that you've photographed. So I'm actually number 8 in the world on number of species photographed.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
There's another thing called a big year. There was actually a movie a few years ago with Jack Black, and that was about 3 American guys that tried to see the highest number of species in 1 year.
How many is that?
Which is just over 700 species, yeah.
Oh.
720 or so. I've also interviewed twice a lady called Tiffany Kirsten, who's now the current US record holder at 725 species in 1 year. She's a really fascinating lady. You also get this big year thing that goes. I do an international big year. Many years I see over 2,000 species in a year, which usually puts me in the top 5 birders in the world for listing. Yeah, so there's quite a competitive element to birdwatching as well.
So what were the names of the websites if people want to check out some of those stats and check out some of your photography? Is that public access?
One is ebird.org.
Okay.
It's something that's absolutely revolutionized birding in the world. It's really quite an incredible project. eBird, that makes this Merlin app. So definitely download the Merlin app. There is an eBird app as well. Part of the Merlin app, which isn't quite available in Thailand just yet, is a function where you can listen to birds and it will tell you what they are. So you just turn it on when a bird is singing and it will say, oh, it's this bird. And this works now in the US, in the UK, a little bit in India, but it's not going to be too long before it works in Thailand as well. So you'll be hearing some birds singing, and then you can have an app on your phone. It's like Shazam,
Shazam for birding.
Shazam for birding, yeah. So this is coming. This is the new era of birding.
That's awesome. You know what? You've led me so nicely on to a little surprise that I've put together.
Really?
Can you guess what I've done?
I cannot.
Okay. I have 12 bird calls.
Oh.
And I've lined them up.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to say that probably to you, they're very easy. But let's find out. Are you up for playing?
Let's do it.
The CNX Podcast bird call game. You're up for it?
I'm up for it.
Okay, here we go. They're pretty random. I made sure I didn't just get English or Asian.
Okay.
They're not obscure.
Okay.
So let's roll number one. You get about 10 seconds of bird call before I hit pause, and then you tell me the name. Okay, so let's start with this.
Easy.
How easy?
Indian peafowl.
Wow.
Sound of India, the wild sound of India.
There we go, the Indian peafowl. So number two is going to be even easier, I think, because I think I got number two.
Oh, nice.
But you can get specific. You can tell me specifically which one it is, or you can just say the category.
No, common cuckoo. I've actually seen this with my son in Chiang Mai, which is a vagrant. We twitched it.
Number three. What do you reckon?
I'm not sure about this one. I'm going to go with nightingale.
You are right, Charley Hesse. You are right. I knew you'd be good at this. I thought the first three were quite easy.
Okay.
For you.
Yeah.
Certainly not for people playing at home.
Sure.
But let's try this one, which I think is a little bit more obscure.
Okay. Yeah, this is the Asian koel.
Correct.
Yeah, one of the wonderful sounds of Thailand. Yeah.
I'm impressed. Yeah. Okay. Next up.
So this is an owl. I'm going to go for tawny owl.
I just had owl.
Oh, you just had owl. Okay.
But I knew you'd be able to embellish that and put some detail on it.
I think this is a tawny owl, which is a sort of a famous Twitu owl.
Excellent. 5 from 5. Let's keep going. Do you need a bit more?
Yeah, give me a bit more.
Forget that last wheel.
This is a tricky one because there's quite a lot of birds that sound like this. And it definitely would have helped to know where it was. Is it a European bird?
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds a little thrush-like. It could be something like a song thrush or something. Or a blackbird or something like that.
No, it's pretty standard.
Yeah.
It was a canary.
Ah.
The picture is a yellow canary.
Yeah. A canary is not necessarily a wild bird. It's become a sort of domesticated bird from other species, which is probably why I was going to get it.
When you say domesticated bird from other species, you mean?
Yeah, it's been bred. It's anthropogenic.
Is there a lot of specific breeding going on?
Well, some people are interested in bird watching. Some people are interested in keeping birds in cages. And the canary is a bird that's been domesticated for a long time. It was taken down into coal pits. You can sometimes get these poisonous gases, sulfur and stuff like that. And when the canary died, it was time to get out of there. So that was
functional birds. Just because you've stumbled across it now, I never thought to ask you, but how do you feel about breeding and captivating birds?
I used to keep birds in captivity. I used to keep cage birds. So I do see the appeal. The main thing is that, so there's been a lot of birds that have become very rare and endangered because people catch them, especially in places like Indonesia. A big part of the culture is to keep birds in cages. So it can be very damaging to wildlife, to bird communities. So if people do keep pets, I would always make sure that they're bred in captivity and not wild caught.
Can we get back to the
We
quiz?
can, yeah.
Good. Okay, so here is the 7th bird.
I would go for European starling.
Ooh.
Any good?
No. Second guess? African?
Oh, an African bird. It sounds like a starling family to me, like a sort of minor or, yeah.
Sure. The answer I had was African grey parrot.
And do you know what's special about the African grey parrot?
I'm about to find out.
Yeah. It's one of the best mimics of any species in the world.
Oh, wow.
It mimics other birds and people as well. It can talk. There's a pool that Ronelle and I often go swimming at, and they have an African grey parrot there. And I heard it. It was like, hello. And they're incredible mimics. And when you get into the wild, they start mimicking all these other species around them.
Possibly not the best example of me to give you their sound because they're tricky.
Yeah.
Tricky. Sorry about that. The game continues. Number 8. Let's see how you get on.
That's got me worried. I'm not sure, to be honest. Could you give me a clue? Is this a European bird again, or?
I wish I had a bit more information. I put this game together in about 30 minutes.
Right.
I can tell you that it's a whistling cockatiel.
Ah, another mimic.
Oh,
yeah.
This is not a great quiz anymore,
No,
is it? If I'm giving you mimicking birds.
But it's cool. It's a bird that people know well. I've actually kept cockatiels myself. Yeah, when I was a kid, I had cockatiels. Beautiful birds.
Bird number 9. And I think just by the name of this one, I might have given you another tricky one.
Yeah, it does sound that there's quite a lot of birds that sound like this. I mean, it sounds like it's in the sort of old world flycatcher family. So there's chats and flycatchers, thrushes, like rock thrushes and things like that.
The answer on my sheet is mockingbird.
A mockingbird. Okay.
Okay, there's 3 more. Let's do it.
Let's go for it.
What do you reckon?
This sounds like a vireo from North America. They have a very sort of these little repetitive phrases. Red-eyed vireo or a warbling vireo.
Oh, here we go.
What is it?
You just hit a key word there. The answer on my card was the hooded warbler.
The hooded warbler? Okay. It's a similar sounding one. Yeah, a lot of the North American birders are quite good at these ones because they sing in spring. You go out into a forest in North America in spring and then it's just full of these little songs.
Here we go. Next one.
Not sure of that one.
Begins with C. I think I'm right in saying this is an North American bird.
I don't know. Catbird or something like that.
A cardinal.
A cardinal. Okay, nice. Yeah.
And then final one.
Yeah, okay.
Here we go.
It's not ringing many bells. Let's have a look.
It was a woodpecker.
A lot of different ones. Yeah, it could have been another North American one. I would say definitely a North America. Somebody that grew up birding in North America would probably have done a bit better there. But
I thought you did great. And I would say that the quiz was a little bit controversial in places with mimicking birds.
No, but certainly it was challenging.
And a host that couldn't even tell you what region they were from. But you did great. And I hope you enjoyed playing.
It was good fun. Yes, thank you.
Sweet. Thank you very much for coming in and giving us this amazing insight. Is there anything that I should have asked you or anything you want to leave us with?
One little thought that I would leave you with. Some people are just naturally bird watchers and some people are not. Some people have a sort of innate curiosity. And this is one of the great pleasures for me is exposing people to it and seeing which ones it catches them. And just seeing that look in a little kid's eye, they're just wide-eyed, thinking, wow, what is this? Just discovering a new world. So when I see certain kids, I can take 10 kids out and maybe only 1 or 2 of them will have this like complete mad curiosity about it. But when I find them, it's like finding a little rough diamond and it can be life-changing. It can change their life. They may want to become a guide or an explorer or a scientist or something. Just that little exposure to wildlife can be life-changing for people. So if you are a parent and there is an opportunity for you to be able to expose your children to this part of nature, and they might not get into birds, they might get into butterflies, they might get into plants, they might get into anything, but just give them that exposure to wildlife to watch their expression change. And it's wonderful. It's just one of the most magical things for me. I love taking kids out. I just love exposing them to nature. I think it's just one of the best things I can do with my skill.
I agree. I think it's a good, wholesome activity. Yeah, it was a nice little sign off there, a nice little kind of just reminder to parents that they could potentially unlock something in their own children. Mm-hmm. And who wouldn't want their kids to have a natural hobby like that? I think it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Final thing, Charlie, can you just tell us where can anyone find you, get in touch with you, or find out more about what you offer?
You can find me on Facebook. It's pretty easy. Charley Hesse with a Y. You can listen to my podcast, Naturally Adventurous. I actually have a second podcast called Chasing Feathers as well, which is a bit more of a sort of geeky birding one.
Let's just list them again. Is it the or just Naturally Adventurous?
Naturally Adventurous.
And the second one?
Chasing Feathers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great names.
So they're 2 good places to start. I do post stuff on Facebook as well. And I'm always happy to hear from people if you want to send me an email or a message on Messenger.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Massively appreciate it.
Thanks, Ash. It's been great.
Cool.
That was CNX Podcast.